episode 11 of Chris Sweeney Talks To. Today I'm joined by Melain Rodriguez. Now she is the Client Services Manager at Viagen Pets, America's pet cloning experts. Very interesting stuff. We had to get her on to talk to her. So first of all, thank you, Melain, for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem, not a problem. Well, I see in the background you've even got an assistant with you. You've brought your own assistant.
This is Benji, and Benji is actually a cloned cat.
Oh, is he? Right. Amazing.
Yeah.
So maybe, so I'm sure people understand what a pet is. People understand what cloning is, but I guess most people have ever heard it in the kind of human context. What actually happens then? So do people maybe have a pet that's going to pass away and they want another pet to replace it? Is that basically what's happening?
That is basically how this process works, and why the process works is what you end up with is a genetic twin to the original animal. So if we've got a client who has a pet that's near the end of its life or has just passed away and they can't bear the thought of being without that pet, then they clone the pet and they have not a reincarnation of that pet. I like to stress that. It's not the same pet all over again, but it's a version of that pet. And it's the closest thing to the original pet because they're a genetic twin, just like human identical twins.
Right. And in terms of people doing it, so is it a business that's becoming more popular? Is it been around a while? Because I've got to say, until I come across Viagen, I didn't really know about this subject.
Right. Most people don't realize that this is something that's happening in reality, and it's not just science fiction. So to give you a little bit of history about the company, we started out as Viagen about 20 years ago, and we were cloning livestock. So cows and pigs and horses, and we've cloned goats and sheep. And that was our primary business 20 years ago. We're cloning livestock. This is something that's widely done in the livestock industry. Mainly for reproductive purposes. So if you have a very valuable stud bull who has valuable semen and you clone that bull, you get a bull that's genetically identical that can contribute the same way genetically. So for livestock, it takes the guesswork out of breeding. You know exactly what you're going to get when you have a cloned animal. It's going to be exactly the same genetics as the original.
Are people more hesitant with pets? Because I think we always imagine that someone. I think maybe a lot of us eat meat. We eat a hamburger, but we don't think where that hamburger came from, or a piece of lamb. But with pets, I think people are a little bit more kind of sensitive and stuff like that. They probably wouldn't eat a cat or a dog.
Right.
Is that quite a difficult barrier? Some people have a hard time processing it a little bit, or
yes. So it's a totally different reason why you would clone a pet. Compared to cloning livestock. And our business really shifted focus in about 2015, and we shifted over to cloning dogs and cats. We still clone horses as well, but we no longer clone livestock. And the reason that you clone a pet is so very different, and there is much more of an emotional reason. So there's that emotional bond, and we pet owners think of our children, as our pets, as children. They're like our children. And sometimes we have clients that may never have had children before. And so their pets are their family and their children. So instead of spending money on a wedding or a college education like they would for their children, they're spending money to clone the pet instead. So, it gives them that way to extend the bond that they have with the pet, because our pets' lives are so short compared to ours, and it's just not fair. They love us unconditionally. So the love that we have for a pet is so strong and so different. And it's really this special bond. So it's really rewarding for me to see that. I usually follow the clients from the beginning when they are first calling in until I'm handing over their cloned puppy or kitten. And it's just incredible. I still get chills about it because it's this gift that we give them that no one else can give them. And that's what our clients tell us is, thank you so much for this gift you've given me. It's so special to them.
Yeah. And Benji there. So, Benji's, maybe you can tell about who Benji was cloned from, and how similar is he to, the cat he was cloned from?
Yeah. So Benji is almost 4 years old, and he is very similar to the original cat. There's this big picture is Benji in the back, but there's a small little picture back there.
Oh, yeah.
Of Prestige, who was the original cat, and he's still alive. So Prestige, the original cat, was actually owned by a friend of mine who is a Bengal cat breeder. And Prestige was one of the top cats in the world. He's a show cat. And so this friend of mine cloned Prestige, and there were 2 kittens born in the litter. So that happens sometimes. It's like IVF in humans. We are transferring multiple embryos into the surrogate. So sometimes you may get twins or triplets. So Benji had a twin brother, and the owner of Prestige took one of the kittens and he gave Benji to me. So it's been really exciting and interesting to see how similar and how different the 2 cats are, raised in 2 different environments. And I'll tell you, this is not typical of a Bengal cat. This breed is usually pretty just on the go and wild and chasing things and very active. And you can see this is what he does all day long. He's very laid back. He just likes to sleep and eat. So interestingly, the main difference that I see between Prestige and Benji is his size, his weight, because he's a kind of a lazy boy. He was neutered when he was 6 months old. And Prestige, the original cat, is still a breeder. So he's fully intact and chasing girl cats around and eats a different diet. So he's nice and trim and sleek, and Benji's a big boy here. So, but other than that, their temperament is so similar, just laid back, easygoing, and that's not typical of this breed. This breed is usually not like that. So the breeder who bred Prestige did a really good job of, he selectively breeds his Bengals to have this great temperament. So a lot of his Bengals are like this, just very mild.
And if Benji, I mean, I don't know, has Benji met Prestige? And if they were to meet, would they have some sort of sense that they were similar? Would that be confusing for the 2 cats and not fair, or is it something they would realize?
That's a really good question. And that's something that a lot of our clients have asked before, because, sometimes they are cloning the animal when the original pet is still alive. Sometimes they've already passed away or sometimes they're still alive. So they've wanted to know, will my other pet recognize the scent of the clone as being the original? So we've learned as we've gone along, the answers to these questions. And from what we have found out, it seems that the cloned animal must have a different scent than the original, because we haven't seen any, or we haven't gotten the feedback from clients anyway, where they've told us that either the original pet recognized itself in the clone, or one of their other pets recognized the clone as being the original. So we think that there's probably, we know that humans each have their own special scent, and I imagine it's the same with pets as well. So it seems that they have a different scent. So while they're genetically identical, there are some small differences between them. Interestingly, we've had a few clients that cloned their dog, for example, when it was really old, a 14, 15-year-old dog. And then they have the clone puppy that comes into the household, and they want them to be friends. But usually that old dog doesn't like the little puppy because, they're old and they want to sleep and they don't want to play with the little puppy, and the puppy is jumping around. So I had a client that was a little disappointed because the puppy and the original old dog didn't get along. But then he called me later, like a year later, and he said, well, finally, she's given in. They're friends now because the puppy is grown up and not wild and chasing her around. Yeah. And now they get along. So he was happy when the puppy was finally out of that puppy stage.
But in terms of the physical characteristics, so, by the time, if you took a picture of your cat or dog at 5 years old and then the clone was 5, essentially they almost should look identical. I know, like you say, they could eat more or be a different weight, but in terms of the physical characteristics, should it almost be looking at a mirror image?
They're very, very similar. Now, one common difference that we can see in the cloned animals are markings. So as you can see, Benji has spots, and the original cat had spots, but the spots are a little bit different shape and size and in a little bit different place in the body. So markings can be different. And that's been very interesting to see how similar or how different the markings can be. So if you have a solid color cat, the clone is going to be a solid color, obviously. But if you have an animal that has random spots, let's say like a Dalmatian with the spots, the clone dog is going to be a spotted dog, but the spots will be in different places. And the best way that I can explain that is if you have human identical twins that have freckles, their freckles are never going to be in the same place. So a cloned animal's spots are like human freckles in twins. So we can see differences like white down the middle of the face in the original, maybe white down the side of the face in the clone. So those markings can shift around a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And in terms of, I mean, I think everyone, when we hear about genetics and cloning, a lot of people start worrying about, your sort of maybe diseases are passed on. And if your cat or dog or pet had died from, I don't know, a disease of cancer or whatever, say, does the clone then inherit that? And do diseases start to become more of an issue as you go down, because you're sort of, you're copying the genetic material of the original cat or dog or pet?
Right. And that is definitely something to be mindful of, because if the original animal has an illness or disease, the cloned animal is not going to automatically be born with that illness or disease unless the original pet was born with that issue. The genetics are going to be the same in the clone, which means if there's a genetic potential in the original pet to have this disease, there's a gene that has caused that disease in the original pet, the clone is going to have those same genes and that same potential to develop that disease at some point in its life. So if you have a dog that passed away at 2 years old of some genetic illness, that's one you may want to think twice about cloning, because do you really want to clone that dog again only to have it live to be 2 years old and develop the same disease at a young age? Most likely not. So when we see, that's sort of a red flag for us. If we see a pet that has passed away at a young age from a illness or disease that is obviously genetically linked, we're going to caution that client. And, I'm in a same situation. I had a dog that passed away at 6 years old from a genetic disease, and I have her cells stored. But at this point in time, I would not want to clone her, because I don't want to have another dog that goes through the same disease and only lives until 6. But who knows? Maybe there's going to be something that they discover that can cure this disease that she had. So that's why I went ahead and banked her cells for the potential of one day maybe cloning her and the ability to cure that disease, where we don't have that ability right now. So that is something that a lot of people don't realize when they hear the price for cloning, which is $50,000 for a dog and $35,000 for a cat, US dollars. This is a huge amount. And we realize that, it's a very specialized technique. So it's a lot of money. So that's not something we know that everyone can afford right now, but we do have the ability to bank the cells and keep them stored for decades. So you don't have to move forward right now if you're not financially ready for the cloning. You can simply bank the cells with us and keep them stored for some time in the future if your financial situation changes. So the majority of our clients are doing that, just banking the cells. And we've got clients from all over the world that are doing this.
Right. So, I mean, if I'm in London right now, you're in America. So if I had a pet, how would I have to physically come to you, bank the cells and go home? Or can I send the cells? How does it work for people outside America?
Yeah, so the cells can be shipped. It can be a little bit more tricky for those clients outside of the United States, because once the samples are taken, they're time sensitive. So we have to have living cells in the tissue samples that we receive in order for them to grow more cells in culture. We multiply the cells in culture so that we'll have at least 1 million cells to freeze down and store. So the veterinarian will take a small skin biopsy from the animal that you may want to clone. And our biopsy kit, we would ship a biopsy kit to you wherever you are in the world. And it's essentially an insulated box with some ice packs inside. And those ice packs, that's the key to keeping those tissue samples viable. So the cells can stay alive in those tissues for about 5 days, as long as they're kept cold. So that's the key, is getting samples to us very quickly. We'll ship them back by FedEx, international priority. So we'll usually receive the samples within 3 to 4 days for those international samples. We do have a partner company in the UK, Gemini Genetics, and they've just recently partnered with us. And so when we have clients from the UK that their pet has passed away, that's a situation where you have to act extremely quickly, because sometimes it may be 1 or 2 days later after the pet has passed away before the client is realizing this is something they want to do. So we work with the lab in the UK to receive samples there, so they can actually receive samples in their lab. So we don't receive the whole animal, just the tissue biopsies that the vet takes is what we receive and what we grow cells from.
Amazing. And in terms of it actually happening, so is there 100% success rate if someone gives their cells and they're on and they're stored, and then obviously their pet passes away? Is it 100% that you're able to clone from what you've got, or is there a failure rate?
So it's not 100%, but it's actually very high. The key to successful cloning is getting good, viable tissues initially. So if we have samples that are taken from a living pet or one that's just recently passed away and they've been received in good condition at the right temperature and the tissues have been kept cold, then there's an over 90% success rate with the cell culturing. And once we have good viable cells, there's a very high chance of being able to clone this animal. Sometimes, like IVF, it may take more than one try. So we'll put embryos into a surrogate. Sometimes she'll get pregnant right away with just one round of embryo transfers and we'll have a puppy or kitten born. Sometimes she may not get pregnant. So in that situation, the cloning is a guaranteed process. So if the first embryo transfer is not successful, we'll transfer embryos into another surrogate and try again. And we'll continue to do this until we have a positive birth. If we're not able to clone the pet for whatever reason, the client is refunded a deposit that they've paid before the cloning starts. It's 50% of the cloning fee is paid as a deposit. But if we get to the point where we say we just can't clone this animal for whatever reason, then the deposit is refunded 100%. And that is a very rare occurrence. We've only done that a few times. So there's a very high chance of success. Sometimes it takes longer than others, but we're typically successful, especially within dogs, within 1 or 2 embryo transfers.
You mentioned surrogate there, so I'm assuming some people, maybe campaigners, human animal rights people, etc. Do they have an issue with the surrogate? Are some people worried that the surrogate is almost being, just sort of being, hosting all these births for clones? Is that a hard balance for you to find, that it's humane, but you've also got a business to run?
So we do get that feedback. And I think a lot of that stems from a little bit of misunderstanding about how the process works, or they're looking at data from 25 years ago when Dolly was born, and it took hundreds of tries to produce this first cloned mammal in Dolly the sheep, which is what most people know about when they hear about cloning. So the surrogates are treated very well. They are a very, very important part of this process. Without a happy and healthy surrogate, we're not going to have a successful birth. So it's in our best interest. Not only do we want to treat these animals right, it's in our best interest to have a happy and healthy surrogate. So they are very well treated. We have a 24-hour-a-day care staff that takes care of them and loves them and plays with them, and they have toys. So it can't be in a home environment just because of disease. We need them to be in a disease-free environment. We can't risk any illness or disease in our surrogates. So they have to be in a controlled environment. But the dogs that are the surrogates, dogs only go into heat once or twice a year. So it's not like they're having litter after litter after litter. There's that break time in between where they're not in heat, so they can't be a surrogate. And we also have the option of having the surrogate adopted out and essentially retired after the puppy is born and weaned. That surrogate can go through an adoption. So she would be spayed and would be adopted out to a great home. So a lot of our clients will choose that option so that they know that their dog surrogate went to a loving home. And with our cats, we do allow the clients to adopt the surrogate mom. So a lot of our clients will choose to adopt the surrogate, so they get home with the mom cat and the baby as well.
Right, because I think most of us have seen TV shows, movies, and you have a surrogate mother. A human, and the child's born, and then that mother bonds, and the people can't take away their surrogate. We've all seen that in a movie setting. Does that happen in this case? Because obviously the animal's being born, or the cat or the dog, but there's no genetic link, but they must feel something. Is that how do you balance that? Because again, that must come up as well, because they're emotional beings, these animals.
You're exactly right. And that's something to be mindful of. So these surrogate moms are bred to have very high maternal instincts. So they're great moms. They love their puppies. They love being a mom. And I do imagine it's a little bit sad for them when their puppies are taken away. But quite honestly, we see where, especially if there's several puppies in the litter, when these puppies get bigger and they're just harassing the mom and always jumping on the mom and biting on her ears. Sometimes she's kind of happy, like, okay, I'm ready for you to go. I'm ready for you to be weaned. So nature kind of works its way out like that.
Yeah, and in terms of the business growing, I mean, are you noticing more and more people doing this? Is this becoming more of an acceptable common practice?
So I wouldn't call it common, but I would say that it's increasing, and I think a lot of it has to do with people just aren't aware that this is something you can do. I get phone calls every day where people are saying, I just found out about this. I wish I would have known about this 5 years ago when my dog passed away. And so it's a growing field. We do minimal advertising. It's really word of mouth. And so but it is growing as more and more people are finding out that this is something that is a business and is being offered commercially. Interestingly, we have seen a spike in business with COVID and with more people being home with their pets and realizing how important their pets are to their lives. We've seen more people want to do this. And so we weren't sure how COVID was going to affect business, but it actually has increased business, and things are going very well, and we're cloning more and more pets every year.
I see. And, right now you were saying it was dogs, cats, but, will there be a move to what, and you said horses, I think. Is there a move? I mean, is there a point where you feel like you'll be doing rabbits and you'll be doing, hamsters and you'll be doing, parrots? I mean, can this go like that? Or do you think the market will stay sort of dog, cat and horses?
So I don't think that it will shift into the other species of pets like rabbits and hamsters, although we have had those requests. I just don't think there's a big enough market at this point to clone those species. But what we are moving into are conservation efforts. So we've recently cloned an endangered species of horse called the Przewalski's horse. So there's not very many of them left in the wild. And so we've worked with the San Diego Zoo, and we successfully cloned this endangered horse whose cells were preserved 40 years ago. So before Dolly was even cloned. Isn't that amazing? That the San Diego Frozen Zoo, they had the foresight to preserve samples from all different species of animals. So the Przewalski's horse is a little bit different species than the typical domestic horse, but they're close enough that we were able to use a domestic horse as the surrogate mom to gestate this endangered species. So I think that's a wonderful use of this technology. So we've done that with this endangered horse. We've also done work to clone an endangered black-footed ferret. So I do see, if we are going to shift things, I see that's the direction that our company may be growing, is in the conservation efforts.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, my feeling to ask you was, we've got Benji there, who's a clone. So can Benji be cloned himself, and then you have a clone of a clone? And is there a point where this could end, or could families sort of have the same pet for many, 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 many generations by always cloning the clone?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so Benji could be cloned, and there is no degradation over time. So if I clone Benji, it would be just like cloning the original cat. So the movie Multiplicity, where there's a clone and they clone the clone and they degrade over time, and you end up with something that's very different from the original. And that's not the case in reality. So you can successfully clone a clone, and we've done that before several times. So yeah, although we still would have cells. I still have cells preserved for the original Prestige. I obviously have a closer bond with Benji because he's my cat now. So I would clone Benji instead of going back to clone Prestige. So we may do that one day.
You never know. And just finally, so for anyone out there that's watching this, listening, and they're considering doing this, is it just give you guys a call and you sort of talk them through the process and see if it's right for them? Is that the best way to go about it?
That's exactly right. We've got a really good website, viagenpets.com, and there's lots of good information on there and frequently asked questions. There's emergency protocols in case a pet passes away and you don't have our biopsy kit on hand and you need to know what to do. All the instructions are there on the website. But we realize this is something that's a complicated process. So there's lots of questions out there. So we're happy to talk to clients and educate them on how the process works. So if anyone has questions at all, they can email us. There's a way to contact us through the website, or they can give us a call and we can walk them through how the process works.
Well, Melain, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I'm sure it's been very enlightening. I was just saying before we started. And like you, I think you mentioned that a lot of people don't know a lot about this. This to me is almost like kind of science fiction, but for you, it's I mean, it's every day. It's a viable business. It's happened a lot. It's not so. I think you see, maybe people don't realize it's so simple and such an attainable thing if you wish to do it.
That's exactly right. I forget sometimes, that I do deal with this amazing technology on a daily basis. So I forget just how amazing it is. So I'm always happy to talk about it and explain to people how the process works.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again. And if anyone's interested, there's Viagen Pets. You can get in touch and they can talk to you. But thank you again, Melain. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
You're so welcome, Chris. Thank you.